We all live on land that has the potential to bear resources that are valuable. What makes those resources valuable is the ability to actually extract the resources and put them into something else that's valuable, which has traditionally been done by outside countries, right? Outside countries coming in and creating influence or making arrangements so that they can take those resources in exchange for something else.
And oftentimes what they're exchanging is infrastructure and know-how, right? Because if you're a poor country full of uneducated people, but you're resource rich, the hardest thing for you is extracting the resources and then refining them into something sellable. So when you have a first world country come in and offer to partner with you, they'll bring in their knowledge, their resources, their know-how. They'll build the infrastructure in your country and then train your people to extract the resources with essentially the promise that 20 years, 30 years, 50 years from now, you'll have your own indigenous capability.
Right.
And that's been the way that the Middle East, and that's the way that, old oil in the 1970s, and that's the way that most of Africa, even now, is kind of abused because first world countries come in and make these deals, and then the dictator or the semi-permanent government of that country says yes.
Right. And I think part of, a large problem with African countries has been the instability. So, throughout history, outsiders have come in, have exploited various peoples around Africa. Africa, was made up of different countries than they have now. Previously, tribal systems, and then you had Westerners come in and colonize, steal people, as resources. I mean, just, really horrible things that have, in the long run, created a lot of damage. And at a time when I think, there was a time when the West was pretty aggressively trying to export democracy as
the solution,
the way, right? It looked like, African countries were going to pick up on that as a solution and run with it and be profitable and be successful. Yeah. But the truth is you can't take a system that, for example, for America was basically homegrown, right? America was born out of a revolution, and we decided that we would be a federal democratic republic, right? We decided that the people here decided that on their own. That was the revolution. Yeah. But you can't export that and just plop it onto other people who have a completely different history and culture and ethnic makeup. I mean, within countries, they have, their own ethnic makeups that make up one African country, right? So, it's not a surprise that it hasn't worked. Yeah. And honestly, it's not a surprise when they poll Africans now, and oftentimes the African people are in favor of a strongman government. If the strongman can get things done, what they want is a solution, right? If the strongman can get things done faster, can put food on my plate faster, give me a job faster, secure my household faster.
Yeah. Then I vote for that.
Then I vote for that.
Right.
Right.
Which is really interesting because what you're basically saying is that, the 1960s, which was a peak of revolutionary turnover in Africa. And Africa is a continent with multiple countries inside it. But during that peak of turnover, there was a movement that went pro-democracy, 1970s, 1980s era. And now, since then, 70s, 80s, 90s, African countries, the people themselves, have seen some growth and some development, but they've also discovered that that democracy is slow.
Yeah.
Democracy means bureaucracy. Bureaucracy means slow.
And it's vulnerable.
Exactly. It's vulnerable because when you treat everybody as an equal, then you assume that everybody has equal invested in the outcome of the state, which is not true. Especially not in a country or in a continent like Africa, where multiple countries have dealt with everything from, extremism to internal coups to, human rights abuses, and the list goes on, right? Oh my gosh, the stuff that exists in Africa, child soldiers and the drug trade and human trafficking, it's Wild West.
Right.
But then, so through this period of increased, investment in the democratic system by multiple countries around Africa, it didn't work.
Right.
Like, it didn't bring them results.
No, it was a facade in a lot of cases.
It didn't change their economic status. It didn't boost their lives. It didn't make a measurable impact on them.
Yeah.
Now, enter into the 90s and the 2000s, strongman leadership starts to press in Africa again, and you start seeing the return of these juntas, these military coups that take over and oust the person in the permanent seat, the voted seat.
Right.
According to democratic standards, and a new strongman leader steps in, and with that authoritarian government, they can make things happen quickly.
Yeah.
And even though they make things happen quickly that benefit themselves as the strongman leader, there is an actual measurable, tangible difference in the lives of individual Africans.
Right.
So then it becomes this trend where, like you were saying, when polls happen in Africa, people are actually saying that they would prefer authoritarian rule over democratic rule. If you like this short clip, make sure you click here to see the next clip, or here to see the full podcast episode.
Freedom! So fresh, so new. Freedom!